And false news has become all too common. More alarming, some media outlets publish
And we are live. What's up, everybody?
Sweet.
What's up, Johnny?
What's up, man?
Good to see you.
you.
Been 2 weeks since we recorded our last episode. Here we are again.
We had to take care of some things.
Indeed. In between now and the last episode, I actually got married. So
What?
big things
You
happened.
got married?
Yeah, you weren't invited.
Yeah. No, it was
Um,
good. I liked it.
Yeah, no, it was a great time. Great having you there with me and all the other fellows, and it's a pretty fantastic
It
time.
was chill. I liked it. It was a good wedding.
And married life has been great so far, which is good. to
You know those
report.
low-key outdoor weddings under a tree? Those are becoming pretty popular.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of those these days. I like that.
Yes, indeed. Well, I know we've been kind of getting into different subject matters, and today I know we kind of were both on the same page about, talking about algorithms,
Mm-hmm.
and also the platforms that utilize algorithms and what they're doing and using them for.
Yeah.
So
It's top of mind, right? With everything that's happening with AI. And, I mean, it's one thing that search algorithms have already been considered sort of uncertain. You know, people are kind of like, who's actually giving me these results? How are they coming to me? Used to, there was a lot more platforms when all this started, or call them platforms or softwares or whatever. Yahoo, right? That was a big one. Bing. Now Google is just everything, unless you have DuckDuckGo or something like that.
right.
That's only one example of algorithms. They're obviously used in many other ways. One thing I wanted to say before we really dig into it, this is the first of many movie of the days, right? So we've got our little analog TV back here. Today I put on Blade Runner, the original, right?
I
Because
watched that last
Did
week.
you?
I watched both of them.
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk about Blade Runner a little bit to get us kind of eased
it
in.
certainly ties in. The hope, or at least the goal for me, is to always have on our movie today will be a sci-fi movie.
Related to what we're talking about.
Yeah, related to what we're talking about. So
That's
today
really cool.
we've got the androids.
Heck yeah. So you play that on DVD? You have
Yeah,
a
that's
DVD?
an old school DVD that has widescreen, and that's a GE. GE used to make televisions. Now they're
Before
like,
they made tanks.
yes, exactly. Now they're one of the corporate owners of the world. Before that, they made TVs, and that's an old GE TV.
Back
I
in the
got
good
that.
old days.
That was only $20. It wasn't working, and I just opened it up and dusted it off and turned a few screws. Now it works fine.
Brushed
So,
off the vacuum tubes.
pretty much.
Well, at least in regards to Blade Runner, and spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed.
Shame on you if you haven't seen it.
I know. I felt a little bit of shame, but now that shame is no
That
longer
shame is
present. It's
gone.
gone. I just thought it was super interesting, where even them talking about the replicants,
Yeah.
whether exactly they were more. I mean, obviously they were manufactured, but
Mhm.
whether they were more computerized or whether they were actually like a android. Usually when I think of android, I think of a blend where it's like a robot machine mind, but it has like a flesh or organic body. There seems to be almost that their genetic code is programmed with a computer, but they found a way to synthesize it into a being
Yeah.
so that it still has a programmed code, but it's not necessarily robotic.
Yeah.
or
Well, this
machine.
this movie and many others like it, the best thing about them are their philosophies. And it poses many questions, many more than it
Unanswered
answers.
questions,
Yeah, and you're
yes.
sort of at the end. You're kind of. I won't spoil it for anybody, so I won't say. But I'm sure you picked up on some things along the way that made you kind of think, what's up with that? So that's
Well,
kind
you
of
as a viewer really have no way of knowing if any of the characters are
that's a good point.
replicants or not.
That's a great point. Yeah.
We don't have any I mean they maybe could have done something. They did do the thing with the eyes,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there were definitely clear scenes where it's like, well, when they did that effect on a human, someone you thought was just human, they had the same thing. So it makes you
Mhm.
question of like, is the whole eye thing is
Yeah.
that really
Is that
human
even-
or is
yeah.
that So very interesting, and
Mhm.
even down to the questions. And the second one, Blade Runner 2048 or is it
2049,
Okay,
yeah.
right. Where you spend a lot of the movie looking at the character and saying, he this
Mhm.
kid that they're looking for, right? And is he human? And even just towards the end, when it seems to answer that question, you still are kind of like,
Yeah.
But was he really?
Yeah, was he really?
Was he really?
I love that movie. It's a good one.
It's almost like where it's up to you to decide who you believe, because you know everybody's got an answer, but like for instance, Rick doesn't know the answer about what the kid is or looks like or whatever. The resistance leader who wants to, you know, convince him that it's this girl and it's not him, but he's convinced based on his memories. It's just very, very interesting.
Spooky.
Yeah,
That's great stuff.
yeah, great film, and I totally recommend it. Because it's probably, I mean, literally today I read an article, saw a video where we've just learned to synthesize a human embryo, which means we don't need sperm or egg. They can purely craft an embryonic human, which means it's past the gestation. I mean, it's like it's past where the phase where we would have, you know, adult sex.
Yeah.
To create the baby, they don't need that part. They can just create the forming baby.
Yeah, it's funky, right? I wrote a script years ago. Well, I didn't write a full script because it's very difficult. But one of the scripts that I was working on the treatment for probably 10, 15 years ago, the working title was Lab Baby. And the whole idea was that there were no organic children at all anymore. They were all grown in labs. And basically mom and dad or mom and mom or dad and dad or whoever, right? Android and human, they would go to these labs to have their baby designed and like choose its, you know, field of study and what it would be an expert at, and way beyond hair color and eyes, right? That's something that maybe I should revisit. I don't know that the whole
that screening does it still use the DNA from the parents to create the baby, or is it purely manufactured from?
It's up to the parent what they want to do, right? So, the idea I had was that was kind of the rule of society now, but then a couple actually does conceive a child organically, and everybody's like,
why'd you do that?
Not only are you not allowed to do that, it's illegal, but also it's like, yeah, you're seen as being like primitive. Right? I don't know. It raised a lot of philosophical, moral questions.
Right.
And and then you had people that affixed to the baby as like being an immaculate child.
Right.
There's all this cult stuff. I don't know. It was pretty interesting. I got into a lot of weird ideas with that one. But
I actually know some folks that, at least I was told, and you know, again, that they don't remember because when they were kids, but I was told that they were lab-grown babies in a sense.
Really?
Now, I think there was involvement of the parents' genetics, but I don't think it was just like in vitro or one of these other treatments where they just take it and do it externally. I think it was a little bit more of a process, experimental process. So it's like, this is very interesting. And plus, you know, we always think of it in the first generation where something like that happens, where a normal human being crafts a edited offspring, right?
Yeah.
But then when you go down the line where it's like 2 or 3 generations, 2 or 3 generations of those edited human beings.
Yeah.
Do they really have any genetic things that can be passed on in the traditional sense? Or like, right? Are these replicants, right? And then can you make a replicant off them?
Yeah.
And you get into that. I mean, we do that with plants, and it kind of usually ends at a dead end.
Where it's all going. Something, I mean, you know, all this stuff's going to get pretty weird.
Yeah.
So, should we talk about algorithms?
Yeah. I have been listening to some podcasts. I've been following one of this gentleman named Robert Epstein. It might be Epstein, but I'm pretty sure it's Epstein.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Not related to Jeffrey Epstein.
No relation.
No connection. So he kind of introduced me to monitoring systems for these algorithms, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll
now take a step back. When you say algorithms, we're not talking about algebra class,
right?
So tell everybody what we're talking about. What kind of algorithms?
Well, so when I Googled, funny things, we're talking about Google today. So when I Googled, ironically, the basic definition of an algorithm, it's a process or a set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations, especially by a computer. Now, you, my friend, have been taking some coding classes at Harvard.
Yes. Oh, I'm trying to.
He's trying to get into Skull and Bones for us too, but we can get it.
Well, it's their online platform now. Anybody in the world can study this stuff online, right? And I'm doing it for certification purposes because I want to get more in the weeds on AI. And so, yeah, we actually recently...
You're actually taking the course. Like, you see the lectures.
I'm taking 2, yeah. I mean, you can see them too. You can see them for free. It's a free platform available, but if you pay money for certification, you get additional resources and things. So I'm doing the program part of it. But so anybody can go watch this lecture, and each lecture is about a topic of programming, topic of coding, and the one we just had was algorithms.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the different types of algorithm models for what you're talking about, compiling data, finding things. It's cool because in that I'll give you just a super basic example that the professor uses in the class, and he's awesome, by the way. Great teacher. He's always like drenched in sweat while he's teaching. It's almost like every one of them's a TED Talk, but he uses the phone book as an example. And he's like, imagine I've got this phone book of Boston or whatever, and you ask me to find John Harvard in the phone book. Where do I start? What are the options for that? It's like, you think about it, right? It's like, well, I could go page by page. That's going to take a long time. And then eventually I'm going to get to the H's and I'll find him, right? Or step one, tear the phone book in half. And then I know he's either in this half or in this half. And whichever half he's not in, because it's not, the H's aren't in there, throw that away. And then I go to that remaining half, I do the same thing again, tear it in half. So that's the most common type of algorithmic searching that's used in computations and coding. There's 3 different types that are really the ones that are used. But that one in particular is most often used because it gets to the result fastest. Right.
Interesting thing too is like in traditional math, we call it things like formulas, right? An algebraic formula where you have a set of variables, you have a process that needs to run, and we figure out operations like add, divide, things like that. With algorithms, like in calculus, functions is where you take a formula and you iterate it, right? So you run it a bunch of times, right? So you figure out what you need to set up to run it and get your answers.
To loop.
So it seems like with algorithms, it is the computer version of a function, mathematical function almost, where it's running this,
it totally is,
churning it.
Yeah.
But you're dealing with data. You're searching for unknowns, or you're picking through stuff, and so that's very interesting to me.
I'd say the weirdest kind of base level thing to me about coding in general, and I've done a little bit of coding in my life and started to learn it early on in my education journey and switched away, and now I'm revisiting it and trying to learn new languages and stuff like that. But loops is like the foundation, which is really weird to think about. Because we always are talking about, like, do we live in the Matrix? Are we in a program? There's a great movie called Looper where the guy has to do the same thing over and over and over, right?
So essentially Groundhog Day, but sci-fi.
Yeah, exactly.
Did they got Bruce Willis in it?
Groundhog or Looper? You talking about? No, Looper is
it's like an older gentleman.
No, it's not Gyllenhaal. It's not Jake Gyllenhaal. It's the guy from 500 Days of Summer, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, right? And maybe Gyllenhaal. I can't remember. I haven't seen it in a long time. My point is, like, the loops, the idea of loops, that's what all this stuff is built on. We live in a loop day to day. The sun rises, the sun goes down, we go to sleep, we get up. It's like
if you stopped recording it, you would never know what day it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Except you have to start at day one somewhere.
It's like we live in an algorithm, but we can get into that later, I guess.
Well,
the
that's,
philosophical part of it.
Yeah, that's when we get into the simulation theory. But like video games are like that too, where you have all your algorithms running, the algorithm that tells the NPCs what to do, the algorithms that handles your combat, right? And so what we're kind of, I think, going to steer towards today is like algorithms that have to do with search platforms and then like social media platforms. And for those people that don't know, and these companies, they're not getting away with everything, right? There's actually 2 major antitrust suits against Google that have happened. One is the EU versus Google. One is US versus Google, which, again, Google's probably not going to naturally make that show up in your search feed. So.
They're basically saying it's gotten too big. Is that what they're...
Well, so with EU versus Google, it's definitely... it was more geared towards, like, when they were using their dominant position in the market to drown out competition, right? So that's things like... Their competition is Yahoo, Proton Mail, not just search engines. It's also, they use the suite of Gmail, right? So they're going to go after anybody who, not go after. They're going to make it so you're not as successful on their platform and you're not showing up in searches if you're a competitive mail platform, right?
I see what you're saying.
That gives you some of the services they have in their free platform, their Google suite. And so, Proton Mail specifically, you can go on their website and go back to some of the other days. They actually, tried to sue Google. I mean, they had real evidence that Google was essentially hurting their business intentionally,
What do you think about this from a capitalist perspective? I mean, Google, they started where anybody else did. They just got really good at what they do, and now they're the top dog. I mean, what do
Right.
you, I mean,
Well, there's a point, I think, and we're reaching a point with a lot of different industries where there's the natural competition that can happen in a free market. Capitalism, I feel like, is separate from free market, but we do have a capitalistic free market.
I mean, do you think,
Capitalism is just about
should they
how
be
do I put
broken
my
up or
money.
not?
Yeah, because I mean that's with monopolies. We did that with the
Make sure you talk into your
Yeah.
microphone. There you go.
We did that with electricity. We've done that with gas,
Yeah,
natural gas. We've done that with a lot of our what we consider
right.
essential resources.
Yeah,
And
commodities.
So, while it may be a company you see, it's still a company that has broader municipalities involved in its operations and
Yeah.
things like that. So with this stuff, Google essentially has formed. They've already formed a monopoly. They have the monopoly.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And a lot of times
You don't
people
use Yahoo anymore?
No,
Yeah, I don't
exactly.
either.
And not only that, and we'll get into it. But you talked about. I want to hear some of you before the episode. We talked about some of your definitions and some of the things about.
Oh,
Google's
my Chat
algorithm.
GPT
So I would,
conversation.
love to hear
Yeah.
that before we get on to it. But I mean, one essential thing is that most websites, most news sites, what they're going to do is they're going to check Google's search engine,
Isn't
right?
it
So
wild?
like,
It's like they become the base of all
DuckDuckGo is just
knowledge.
going to say, hey,
Yeah.
we're going to look at Google's archives. We're going to look
Yeah.
at their web
They don't
crawls.
all do that, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
So
That's-
that even if you're going to a different platform, they're still going to use Google's blacklist, right, to see whether it's safe to put it on the internet, because they do have a cutting edge of here's stuff that's not good, right? So
Yeah.
like you don't want to see murder websites.
Yeah.
You don't want to see
beheading videos and all that kind
right
of stuff.
where they're
Yeah,
selling
it's
human
gotta be
people and
filtered
bodies.
out.
So they filtered
Yeah.
out 90+% of the internet that's
Mhm.
blacklisted, right?
Yeah.
And so then other companies, just to be safe, they just follow Google's blacklist code, right? Because
They're like, they've got a good set of rules. We
Right.
can get a head start. Just go with what they're
right.
doing. Yeah.
And that plays back into what you were talking about before. So give us a rundown of kind of like how Google operates and how it pulls and what information it's doing.
Well, and thinking about a definition of algorithms for searches, right? It's kind of like I can come up with my own, or I can have a conversation with ChatGPT about it. So that's what I did. I just said, can you give me a definition, provide me one, for online search algorithms, such as those used by Google? Because I just really wanted to know what ChatGPT had to say.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those cases where it's not necessarily doing what you said. It's more based on the LLM, that's being built, the open source LLM. So it basically said, similar to what you said, their, search algorithms are methods and techniques used to retrieve relevant information from a vast collection of data, like the web, based on a user search query. They can scan and rank billions of pages to present the most relevant and useful results. Major search engines like Google rely on complex search algorithms to process, index, and rank web pages. There's 3 key components to it, online search algorithms: crawling, indexing, and ranking.
Crawling, indexing.
Crawling, the algorithm sends out web crawlers, also called spiders or bots, right, to discover new pages and update existing ones. So the first thing that happens is that. Indexing happens after that. The content from the crawled pages, so what the crawling gets, it brings back, right? And then that's stored in a massive database called an index, where the text and other data from each page are organized and categorized. And then ranking, the algorithm ranks index pages based on their relevance to the query, which can include factors like keywords, user locations, page authority, how many and what quality of links point to it, and the content quality and freshness.
These days also, whether or not it works with the narrative.
We get into that. I talk about it. I kept talking to it, but their Google search algorithm is called PageRank. And it takes into account how many other sites link to a particular page and the quality of those links. So over time, Google, its algorithm has become enhanced with additional updates, one of which is called RankBrain, which is a machine learning component to PageRank. And there's one called BERT, B-E-R-T, that means better understanding of natural language. So they're also using AI and machine learning now as a part of PageRank, which is really interesting. And then, you can really get into the weeds of all this stuff, like relevance and popularity bias, personalization, location, SEO, content aggregation, duplicate content, freshness, bias towards established brands, which is really interesting. Google tends to favor established, well-known brands in search results. This brand bias is because trusted brands often have a large digital footprint and are less likely to be spammy or provide low-quality content. So, in summary, their search algorithm is designed to prioritize relevance, authority, and user experience, but it often leads to the dominance of popular and well-optimized sites. So, as a result, other potential results may be buried, reducing the diversity of information presented in the top results. And so,
Right.
there's obviously pitfalls to all of this. And so I asked it, I said, how is popularity bias determined? I'm like,
Or you mentioned useful earlier, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm like trying to figure out how to cook, and 10 different sites have the same recipe in the processes, how does it determine like, oh, well, this one actually is more useful than that one, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where it seems like a very subjective
Yeah.
of opportunity for subjectivity, and like you said, popularity bias.
Yeah.
If you're the one controlling virality,
Yeah.
but then you're using a popular,
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, it's popular." Well, is it popular because you made it viral?
Yeah. That's PageRank. And so let's talk about that. How is the popularity bias determined? In search algorithms like Google's, it's determined through various signals that measure a website's authority, credibility, and overall prominence on the web. Key factors include backlinks, which we talked about, like how many reputable sources link to it, which is a core of PageRank, Google's PageRank system. User engagement metrics. So Google tracks how users interact with search results and use this data to determine which pages are more popular or engaging. So we're kind of all getting the same stuff, right? They look at click-through rate, dwell time, how long you're there, bounce rate, if users quickly leave the page. They look at traffic volume. Websites that receive a large amount are generally seen as more popular. They look at social signals, which is really interesting. It says, while social media activity is not a direct ranking factor, high levels of sharing and engagement on platforms like X, Facebook, or LinkedIn can indirectly boost a page's visibility. If a page is shared or talked about a lot, it could gain more backlinks and traffic. Brand recognition, we talked about. Content freshness, domain authority, for example, Wikipedia, CNN, right? They can determine the popularity of individual pages on that domain. User reviews, site usability and performance, query volume. So there's a whole bunch of that, but then here's what I asked it. I was like, okay, thanks for your list. Here's what I asked. How big of a role do humans at Google play in censoring search results and providing editorial input to filter search results? So I'm trying to really hammer in, let's talk about it, right? And it says basically, while Google's search results are primarily driven by algorithms, humans do play a role in shaping how those algorithms function, and humans do oversee certain aspects of search result moderation. So, their direct influence on day-to-day output of specific searches is limited, but, because the system's largely automated for obvious reasons. But the key ways humans contribute, there's search quality raters, which is interesting. Google employs thousands of human evaluators, known as search quality raters, who provide feedback on accuracy and quality of search results. The raters don't directly control or change search results, but evaluate them based on guidelines set by Google. And then they have another kind of acronym. Google's Search Quality Evaluator Guidelines serve as the basis for this human input. The guidelines define concepts like expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, and how they should be applied to rank content quality. So they do that, right? They look at search quality raters. They also adjust their algorithm. So human engineers and developers at Google continuously work to tweak and update the search algorithms. So you've got engineers involved. Then you have some core algorithm updates or specific adjustments to combat spam or misinformation. And then you actually have manual actions, content removal or demotion, right? Google Search Console gives Google the ability to apply manual actions against pages that violate its guidelines, whether that be spam, copyright violations, or their third category, misinformation or harmful content. Pages that promote fake news, dangerous misinformation, for example, health misinformation or harmful behavior. So you're already seeing some Orwellian stuff that's buried in here. The capabilities there. If they did want to bury some of this information, which we saw obviously happen during COVID. And then the fifth one is government requests. Hello, ding, ding. Google receives requests from governments and legal authorities around the world to remove content from its search results. These can include requests for content removal on grounds of national security or law enforcement needs, defamation or privacy laws, copyright infringement or violations to intellectual property rights. So really, I mean, a lot of that is for good reasons, right?
Right. Well, you could think about, like, what if a nation wanted to say, Google, you cannot display any porn
Yeah.
on anybody in our country that is searching for porn.
Sure.
It will not show up. It'll
Yeah.
be removed. China, of course, is going to do
Yeah,
things
Muslim countries are like that for
Right.
sure.
So it makes sense, like, that
all
a
those
government should be
requests.
able to say, hey, Google,
Yeah.
you can't do that. Now, of course, when that becomes authoritarian and, like, in the instance, like, of the fake news and misinformation, they're usually looking at either the authoritativeness,
Yeah.
a government agency, what they have to say,
Mm-hmm.
or a fact-checking thing, right? So then that same thing happened with Wikipedia, where it becomes this echo chamber of references and
Sure.
bibliographies where they just are circling and confirming each other,
It's a snake eating its own tail.
and you can't update
you know?
it
Yeah,
because
there's-
their information doesn't say it. But
Yeah.
it's like, even if it's saying, hey, their information's bad,
Yeah.
no, well, this is what our information says.
To go a little bit further, getting into this, the government request stuff. I mean, so all those requests are handled by human teams at Google. So none of that is really algorithmically determined. I mean, the algorithms push it to these people, right? And their requests are handled by human teams, but only in cases where the content violates specific legal frameworks. And Google does publish transparency reports that show the number of requests that they receive from governments and the volume of content removed. Then we get into some super interesting stuff, sensitive and controversial topics. So on topics such as elections, public health, terrorism, Google may apply human editorial oversight to ensure that high-quality authoritative sources rank higher. This has been particularly relevant during events like COVID-19 or elections where misinformation can have serious consequences. In these cases, Google's team may evaluate content from trusted sources, and what they're calling here trusted sources is government agencies, WHO, reputable news outlets, to counteract the spread of harmful misinformation. However, the process still largely depends on automated systems that have been guided by human input. So, I mean, that directly hits on the head your point. It's like, well,
Sometimes
who are
the
these
government trusts
reputable
Google,
outlets? Yeah, I mean,
and then sometimes Google says, oh, we trust the government.
yeah,
So what happens when
five.
you have appointed officials? Well, and this is some information I was going to get down to, but it's relevant now. During Obama's second term, 7 federal agencies were headed by former Google executives, top-ranking executives.
pretty wild.
Again, during that administration, 250 Google employees went back and forth between the Obama administration.
Where does the government end and the Google begin?
means
Right.
You did something good for the Obama administration,
Yeah.
you get a job at Google. Someone at Google
Yeah.
did a good job for Obama, you get to come
I
over
love
and
how
be in the
that's not
administration.
considered corruption. Eric, the Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, just got arrested for, corruption
Yeah.
because Turkish money, he's getting gifts or whatever. I mean, how's that any
He
different?
got arrested.
Nepotism, or he's been indicted or whatever. I don't know
Gotcha.
if he's been
I was just
arrested.
curious. I heard
Yeah.
briefly about it. I just don't. I haven't
Whatever
heard
it was, I scrolled past it. I'm like, oh, well, big deal. I mean,
That's the
I
face
guess
of
it
the
is a big
Democratic
deal.
Party, I heard.
Well, I don't know. But my point is like,
For the future.
that's like what the stuff he's doing. They're like, you can't do that. But then the stuff you just described, where it's like you scratch my back, I scratch yours, nepotistic hires, all this kind of BS.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
mean, totally. Well, and that's where, you've explained the algorithm, and of course, ChatGPT is doing its best based on the information it has available to share that.
Yeah.
That's
Which is pretty good.
Very much the technical side.
There's
of the
more,
algorithm.
but that's probably enough.
That
yeah.
algorithm is concerned with getting the information right and then showing it to you.
Yeah.
There's another side of Google's algorithm, which is the user interface,
Yeah.
your own personal algorithm, the customizability,
Yeah.
and things called ephemeral experiences.
Mm-hmm.
These are like fleeting, one-time generations of recommendations. This is, search suggestions when you start typing. What is the fill in the blank?
Yeah. What does it fill in?
Search results, right? So you might search the same thing twice, and it puts different links up each time. So these ephemeral experiences, they're not. You can't just go find it in your history.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back to where a link you clicked in your history, but you can't go back to that same page where when you started
Sure.
typing it in, it filled in the blank or it
Yeah.
showed you something. And so this also includes answer boxes. So now at the top, they've got the AI answer box. Where
gives you the quick, short
the too long
TLDR.
didn't
Which I love that. It's
news
great.
feeds, right? So showing you the articles
Sure.
at the bottom. For YouTube, which is Google owned, it's what video's up next, what it'll play when your other video ends.
It's like Spotify gives you songs you like.
Right. You're essentially your For You page. TikTok is called your FYP or For You page. All these are ephemeral experiences, and they're curated by Google. And that's where we'll get into some other stuff. And I want to show you that website that Dr. Epstein has created, which is called America's Digital Shield, where his monitoring system.
I can put it up. You want me to put it up?
Let's wait just a little bit,
Okay.
because we were starting to talk on some election type stuff.
Yeah.
I do want to get into what type of content they're showing people.
Okay.
We can look at their biases. But, surprise, surprise, it's not. We're told that our algorithm is custom tuned so that based on what our interests are after so many searches and so many that it will show you what it knows you will like.
Yeah.
And that's what we're told. But the case is when you start monitoring and the way he does it essentially has, thousands of users who've signed up to his program. I believe they install a software or they find some link so that they can just, in the background, they're just watching you use Google like a normal person, right? So Google starts to show them they capture this stuff, and then they're able to measure bias and measure whether sometimes, the algorithm's not accurate. But sometimes it's showing you something that it knows you don't like, and it's showing it to everybody. So when you actually...
Is that a paid promotion? What is that?
Well, in the case of this stuff, it was particularly with election-related stuff.
Go
right?
get your Pfizer shots or something?
Right. Well, I mean, of course, big deal with COVID, but
Yeah.
specifically with the election type stuff, it's things like a reminder to go vote.
I see.
And it's in the months before
Government advertisements.
Right. In the months before, it's go register to vote.
Register
right?
to vote.
And so
Vote
what you're
by
able
mail.
to do is say, okay, we know this user is Republican or Democrat.
Non-citizens vote here.
Right.
Yeah.
And his data shows that during, especially around the 2020 election, there was like a rather large increase of Democrats being shown go vote, go register to vote, versus on the conservative side, we're not showing these.
Don't go
reminders,
vote.
right? And this includes Facebook and other platforms that did this too.
Isn't that wild?
And so sometimes we think of censorship as they lock down the truth and they keep it in a black box. That's not always the case. It is what they can subtly suggest to you, and you won't even know that that's their bias.
Yeah, sure.
They're just able to curate what you actually see instead of like hiding the truth or telling you a lie.
So if you were like, for example, they know in
misdirect
your Google searches you like to hunt and fish and go shop at Bass Pro, then they don't give you the go to vote thing. They've determined that you're probably not a Democrat.
Yes, exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
So it's not just I go visit political sites that are one way or another.
They like judge people based
know
on their behavior.
You're a country person. You are also YouTubing how to work on trucks. Like they know,
which is totally bogus because I know plenty of Democrats that hunt and fish and shop at Bass Pro, but they're using those types. It's their algorithm. They're right. They're kind of like, well, this person's probably not.
Not only that, they interconnect with each other through the big data thing. We've been hearing about big data, and but Facebook and Instagram might capture things about you that Google's not able to. But then they're sharing with Google what they find.
Yeah.
And Google sharing what they find. I mean, we know now that Google's connected to YouTube. So if you send emails regarding something, you might see a YouTube video about it, or you might talk. Some apps, especially on phones, in their user agreements, they're allowed to track your video or your voice. They can record what you say and capture keywords, and then show it to you on your platforms later. Well, Google can't do that, right? Because they have limitations. So by dividing and spreading out, this app captures that type of information, this app captures that type of information, then they're all sharing this big
So what's going to
picture.
happen when all that data goes into Rehoboam? The super AI computer. Because the humans up to now, they've been using algorithms and softwares and whatever, their models to use all that information.
Right.
But when humans are pretty limited, as we can see, right? AI can do things 100 times, whatever, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times better, faster, whatever, et cetera, than humans. So when the AI gets involved with all this data, what are they going to do with it?
Right.
Like,
I mean, yeah, because all you got to do is just start putting AI in charge of because AI is essentially the difference between the algorithm, because algorithm is an automatic function too,
Mm-hmm.
right? So tweaking the algorithm really isn't the way that they go about curating and censoring. They more do the blacklisting thing, right?
Yeah.
So that the algorithm doesn't have to be changed in order for you to not show up. They just have to add your name or add this thing, this specific topic to those lists you're talking about
Yeah.
manually, a human adding it.
Yeah, add it in there.
And then the algorithm will do the job. And so they, they're not saying, oh, our algorithms are censoring the truth. It's like, no, but through these other processes, you are.
Here's an interesting thing about this. So I was going to talk about censorship and regional legal compliance related to all this. So in certain countries, Google is required to comply with government regulations that enforce censorship. For example, in China, before Google withdrew from the market, the government required Google to censor politically sensitive topics. Similarly, countries like Turkey or Russia may demand the removal or censorship of certain content deemed illegal or harmful by their respective governments. So it's interesting that, Google withdrew from Chinese market because of these requirements of censorship from the government, but they can't withdraw from the U.S. market, and if it does become that we live in a more authoritarian country in the years ahead, what are they going to do? Unless they're like you're proposing, or whoever is, that they're essentially in bed with the authoritarians, and then they don't have to withdraw themselves from the market because they actually agree with all of the suggested censorship that's being proposed, right? So in that case, they'd just be like, yeah, we'll do that. We'll censor anything you want.
Right. Well, and, in regards to the China versus US thing, I feel like Google in some ways is bigger than some governments.
It's its own country.
And some governments will play ball, some won't, right? I mean, I feel like in terms of China probably has its own thing going, its own authoritarianism that they'd rather Google not come and affect their authoritarian state, versus in other places, Google could help create the authoritarian, the oligarchical tech elite state, right? Whatever that is, they have in the U.S. they have a fertile playground to do such a thing.
Yeah.
Versus in China, they've kind of locked down what they want to be said, to be spread, and then they also, from what I recall with China and Google, is that China wanted the keys. They wanted Google to spread their legs and say, you do what we say.
It's like the U.S. with TikTok.
Algorithms.
Right? It's like, we won't do the TikTok thing unless you allow us to control it here, right? That's that's interesting that you.
Well, and so with this stuff of what I've been talking about, there was around the 2015, 2016 election. One, for instance, was they found a Hillary Clinton pro-Hillary bias in all 10 search positions on the first page of Google search, but only on Google, not on other platforms.
Yeah.
So when you Google some of these things related to her, you saw the real stories that people were looking for. And I feel like in this era, it was a little more. I was noticing it, but I don't think a lot of people were noticing it.
Yeah.
And Google didn't really know that they were being watched at that period.
Who caught him in that?
That would be Mr. Epstein.
And
so in 2018, he took a lot of this information. Let's see, where's my note on that?
Took it public on his blog or something.
He talked to the the Wall Street Journal about these ephemeral experiences, and specifically this was related to Trump's travel ban. So the kind of the big thing was there was emails leaked from Google where they were like, how do we use these experiences to shape how people think regarding his Muslim travel ban, right? And so that kind of kicked off a lot of the how do we utilize this all, right, leading up to the 2020 election.
Yeah.
And according to Mr. Epstein, just those ephemeral experiences about voting, they're able to shift and bring to the table more votes, right? A percentage, right? So you can measure that.
Yeah.
So then it's how hard do you want to go, right?
Yeah. They're working in the margins.
You don't want to do it so much that it's obvious that you're trying to influence an election. And there's nothing wrong with saying go vote. They're not saying go vote this way or that way. But when you look at who they're showing it to, right, that's where you see these biases.
Well, think about this. If they can do that targeted, which they can, not only to you, but to like a county, like they know, like this is a swing county in Pennsylvania in the Rust Belt. These are the 5 states that matter in the swing states. Now we're going to target this county, these types of people to make sure they go vote for their candidate, right? That's pretty wild stuff when you think about it, because you know that they have the ability to do that. So why wouldn't they if they
Right.
have a candidate, a preferred candidate, right? That's aligns with their values or what they'd like to see the future of the country be. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so he predicts or based on his data, not predicts. He you can't know for sure on some of these things because we don't have the ability to. We only know the user and what they're being shown, and then voting outcomes. So he believes somewhere between in 2016, somewhere between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes were affected because of the search results. In 2020, he believes 6 million votes that went to Joe Biden that would not have otherwise were due to this, right?
That's wild. I wonder how he figures that out, comes up with that number.
So that's where he's looking at
He has an algorithm.
how you, and it is kind of, it's tricky, but it's because it's data science.
Well, here's what's interesting about it. I actually don't even really care how he figured that out. His point is taken, which is that they have the capability to do this.
Yeah.
That's really the most important thing that you can take away from it is.
Well, and he what he's looking at too is like Google's increasing this activity right in the past 10 to 15 years. So you can see a progression as the more of it occurs. We're seeing bigger voting outcomes that have never been seen before. You're again seeing in certain places votes pop up that maybe weren't. Those may not be fake votes. They're just have the power to bring more votes to the table.
Yeah.
And truly,
which
you
I'm all
talk
for
about
that.
Millions of votes.
Yeah, more people should vote as long as, in my opinion, you are a citizen that pays taxes.
If you're doing it equally to everybody.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know.
For instance,
that's another topic for another day.
2022, November 8th in Florida on Election Day, Democrats were getting go vote reminders on their homepage, and close to 100% of Democratic users were shown versus 59% of Republican vote.
Wow.
So that's where you're picking who you're bringing more votes to the table for.
Yep.
And truly, when it comes
Picking
to
winners and losers,
right, elections and
Yeah.
electorate college, you're really only looking at a few swing states, and then within that state, only a few swing counties.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So where
They
you're
can
really
hammer
talking
those
about
counties home.
you might have a couple million more votes than me in the popular vote, but in those swing states, all I needed was 40 to 70,000
Yeah,
different
20,000
Trump
was the
supposedly
difference.
lost by only like 40 to 70,000 votes.
in Pennsylvania or something. Yeah,
And so truly all you have to do is that's not a lot of votes,
no,
right, to swing an election.
Well, it's all binary at the end of the day.
Right.
It's all ones and zeros. So who knows? I mean,
Right, with this, they don't even really have to do that much.
Yeah.
Right, so they can really fly under the radar. If you're doing it, broad swaths of these things, especially close to an election, it's a little more obvious. But
Does
that's
it not
such a
then
minute
be-
number you can work
it is
with.
a minute number. And does the ordinary average person out there not understand the risk involved with electronic voting, especially if it's on the cloud or connected to anything? I mean, that's a
'cause
major concern. That should not be a party thing where it's like we need to vote paper ballots on election day. People try to say like, oh, that's you're rigging the election if you do that. I don't know, man. It's like technology is just going to become a bigger factor as we move forward, and then your elections could be messed with by anybody. Like you could have foreign adversaries going in there with their, black hat hackers and being like, let's move these numbers over here. I mean, I don't.
Right, because when we ask this question of is our voting systems, we
Are they
This may not
secure?
be the episode to talk about because I don't know a ton, but
Yeah.
at least when that was all in question, it was like 60 Minutes goes and talks to the voting machine company, and how everybody that's what they think is
Dominion.
based on this interview.
Yeah, I
Right,
love
so
that
it's
their
like-
name is Dominion Voting. It's like,
And of
the
course they're going
Death
to say
Star voting.
it can't be hacked or
Yeah.
it can't be changed, and of course they're going to give you a big explanation how they make sure. But
oh no, it's all safe, 100%.
Right.
There's no fraud at all.
and that's traditional voter fraud. But this is a type of voter manipulation that doesn't require the voter fraud. It doesn't
Yeah.
require Mickey Mouse voting 100 times.
Yeah.
It
Well, that's
only
the same
requires-
stuff they've been doing in the media for years, which is pushing certain messaging that they want and
Right.
burying messages they don't want, right? That's how the elections are tampered with. You look at that debate, like how many times did they fact check Trump and they didn't fact check her at all?
Yeah,
The
I got a buddy-
moderators were like ganging up on him, and meanwhile it's kumbaya with everything she says. I mean, that's one of the many ways that ephemeral, that's how you
Right.
impact the
Just
voting.
slightly
the
curated
electorate.
statements that questions are angled this way versus angled
Yeah.
that way. And
The good thing is people can see through that. Now you have entrenched party, voters who are like, well, I'm voting for my horse either way. It doesn't really matter to me, but the people that are like that need to open their eyes to what's happening and see the dangers, because
Right. 'Cause
what
it's
if
not
the
just
pendulum swings the other
voting.
way?
right,
You're not going to be real happy with that.
right.
they all start ganging up on your person and fact checking your person and not the other one. Like that doesn't. We need a fair election. Can we have a free and fair election, please?
Yeah.
And not have all this other
Totally.
stuff.
Well,
like,
and it's not just the go voting reminders, right? Because that is something that can happen around an election, and specifically, because of some of the actions he spoke with some congressmen. Dr. Epstein spoke to some congressmen, and they wrote a letter to Google, and literally they saw one day in like Georgia, around the Georgia elections, they removed all bias from their stuff. So they literally were like, okay, they just called us out. We're going to turn it off for like a couple days.
Caught
around.
with their hand in the cookie jar.
And so, but outside of that, they can use these ephemeral experiences and their algorithms to shift your bias over time.
Yeah.
So they might not be doing the election-related
brainwash.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, but they can shift your opinions slowly by curating it, because we're all using Google to find our information. Then they can change the way you think over time. Not only that, they know how you think based on your
it's predictive.
data that you're
It's
giving.
predictive thinking. You hear people all the time saying, I think my phone's reading my mind. It's like, well, no, but it is reading your behavior, and it knows that you need to buy a new whatever XYZ for your patio. So it's going to start giving you ads. Even though you haven't searched for that yet, it's kind of putting 2 and 2 together that this is what you need, whatever. And then somebody's like, wow, I didn't even type that in, and it just gave it to me. I was thinking about that last night. So it does start to feel like mind reading.
Yeah.
But
and plus location tracking. I mean, you maybe walked into Lowe's, but you didn't, whatever.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, now we're starting to know, why is it showing up yard furniture in my algorithm? I didn't search anything. I just went to the store.
But you went to this aisle in Lowe's. It's got like the map, memory stored in there, and it knows on this aisle of Lowe's is like ceiling tile or whatever, ceiling tiles. And so it's
crazy.
Yeah. It tracked your location to the lawn aisle at Lowe's.
It's wild. And that's where I think we have to look at platforms. If it's free, then you're the product. And
yeah, for sure.
Again, you might bring this to someone and say, well, it doesn't really affect me. I don't listen to Google very much. And so, but it is affecting our population on a huge basis. Yeah. And to me, that's very concerning.
We're also in the infantile analog phases of this stuff. We're in early stages. This is like going to go a lot further.
Indeed. And that's
the Amazon drone's going to fly by your house with a chair and be like, would you like to buy this today? It's just going to be there. They're just going to start shipping stuff.
You were going to buy this, but we already flew it here, so you have to buy it
here
now
it
anyway.
is. It'll just turn up at your door. Would you like to keep this item?
Yeah, that's wild.
Isn't that nuts?
Let's take a look at that website, America's Digital Shield.
Okay.
I just want to look at a couple, different data points.
Cool.
Are we ready?
Yeah. It's up
so
there.
this counter is live, and so this is how many ephemeral experiences they've captured. So they're at 100 million at this point.
Wow.
Right before he went on the Joe Rogan podcast recently, Dr. Epstein.
Yeah.
And they were at like 99. He was hoping to get 100 million, but since then we've gotten like 5 million just in a couple weeks. And so he focuses a lot on what's being shown to children.
Go back to that thing at the top, that counter thing. Yeah, I just want people to be able to read that.
Yeah, big tech companies use ephemeral content such as search results, go vote reminders, video recommendations to rig our elections, indoctrinate our children, control our thinking. They're preserving this kind of content for the first time ever to give our courts and our nations the evidence they need to force these companies to stop their manipulations. Now, specifically what he's talking about is me and you, we can tell a story that's anecdotal, that's not admissible court evidence. And so none of this behavior that Google is doing can be brought to court until you actually monitor it and you have physical evidence. You can't just say, we have 100 people saying Google was showing us
That's why
some
he's
wild
trying
things.
to collect it all.
Yes.
So his goal is like a class action lawsuit, basically.
I'm gonna get past that because that's a little, But so we haven't talked about it so far because we're talking about adults being affected, elections being affected. But one big thing is we're putting iPads in front of kids. We're putting them on YouTube, and you might start it on Blue's Clues, but I mean this type of content is where they get to where again either they're watching a normal video, and then it pops up and flashes a few seconds of that, right? It's showing this to kids, right? So things like violence, nudity. We'll skip past that. We don't need it. Okay, I'm going to get past that because we don't need that.
Well, how's that stuff being filtered to them?
So for recommended for you videos, right? And so then again, we show some kids this stuff, or some AI bots start showing people this stuff. Again, kids watch it, and I don't know if you've noticed on YouTube, it has the little hump where it shows like most viewed
Yeah.
segment, right?
Sure.
So kids tend to rewatch that a lot, or they'll start a video, then they'll look for the most viewed
I see.
segment. And so, again, once kids start watching this, it starts recommending it to other kids. So, again, kids don't have the same barrier. I mean,
how does it know it's a kid if it's on like mom's iPad? Or maybe
usually
behavior?
there's a YouTube for kids now.
Gotcha.
Because this used to be a lot worse. There were some things that were happening where, some really dark stuff was getting fed to kids.
Yeah.
And then YouTube was like, oh my gosh, we got to stop this.
Yeah.
And so people were starting to copy this generated content.
I see.
And so once humans started making it, it was just kind of got out of hand. And that's also, I make content on YouTube. That's when they started doing is this for an audience 18 plus, or is this for kids? And it's not just saying, is your content like G rated or PG rated? It's, did you make this for a kid? Is this a kid video? Is it a kid toy? Is it a kid show? And if it's not specifically tailored to kids, no kid is going to see it.
Yeah.
Then they, of course, release YouTube for kids. So in that case, if they're on YouTube for kids, like mom opens YouTube for kids or creates a YouTube account and says this kid's under 13, that's there, right? So the algorithm knows you're a kid. And so it's then what is being put in these algorithms for kids that is getting past those filters.
Yeah. Government brainwash.
And again, a kid, I mean...
Start pushing COVID cartoons to them.
Right. A kid doesn't know how to not search something once it gets in his mind, right? Usually kids don't have that self-control. So, I mean, we know this from porn addictions and all these things but outside of that, things like violence, disturbing images, things that actually might make a kid scared internally, might leave a psychological impact.
Sure.
And so then it perpetuates itself. And so you're creating addictions to these things that are inherently not good for a kid's mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Like Dude Perfect. They love watching that. I'm sure the algorithm pushes that to them all the time. Right.
Or Mr. Beast, right?
Yeah, Mr. Beast.
You get things where now things are coming out about Mr. Beast and his team, where there's one of his partners was, transitioned, but there's also some stuff with kids he was doing.
Bunch of questionable activities.
Whether or not people were actually getting money, even though the videos they were. So he's for kids. It looks like a kid show, but there's a much darker side of things going on.
Or it's like Taylor Swift.
Right.
And then all her lyrics you listen to or see her dancing, you're like, I don't know if I want my 10-year-old daughter being a Taylor Swift, Swiftie, you know what I'm
or
saying?
Ice Spice, right? Or like
any of that stuff.
Young girl. Are we still on the? Okay, so a few more ones I wanted to look at before we can kind of move past the data side of things. This is bias and how they're getting bias of these numbers and how much I don't know, like how many searches per million,
what their algorithm
or whatnot.
is.
But you can look at all time. And this is where I think you see some interesting things. So since they started monitoring Google, right, you have huge swaths towards the middle, right? And then a huge lean towards one side, again, in like 2023. So this starts in 2022, right? So we're not close to election cycle. There's no need to tighten up, right? But as you start getting into primaries, last summer, right? Then you want to start pushing a candidate, right? You want to start pushing search results about Joe Biden is mentally fit.
Joe Biden needs to resign so we can put in Kamala Harris.
Right. And so now you look at Bing, right? They have I may not be reading that one right because I don't think Bing is as biased, but it very well could be.
Well, it's Microsoft's.
Right.
Yeah, that's their.
Imagine trying to search Bing for COVID related stuff.
What happens when you have multiple Death Stars at the same time? Vying for
that's crazy.
Vying for control of the galaxy.
Right. And then this one was the last one I want to kind of look at. On the left we have the U.S. political landscape of like red versus blue states.
Yeah.
Right. On the right you see the bias in search results sent to these states.
I'd like to see that down to the county level. Right now it's showing the state level, but yeah, if you could see the county map of that.
Let me. Nah, it doesn't.
He may not have it quite that.
It allows me to interact with it and see the level of
pretty
bias.
Interesting though.
But yeah, you see the much darker ones in Nevada's a swing state. That's a big one. The Iowa caucus.
Well, it's all through the Rust Belt. You can see. Yeah.
Right. And so it shouldn't be that. If the algorithm works the way they say it should not be leaning that way in every state. You should have Texas, Arkansas and Mississippi going strong. Like they're like, we don't mess with those.
The whole map's blue.
Can't trick those. Right. And so, that shouldn't be the inherent bias. And That's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
And that means they're pushing a message across
Yeah.
subtly to people.
You know, the sad thing about this in the back of at the end of the day, I'm like, well, yeah, of course they are.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not surprised.
Google
I
was
mean-
the number one contributor monetarily to Hillary Clinton's campaign.
Mhm.
So they were very mad after.
Well, they
Trump
were
won
probably
the
like,
first time.
how did we not elect her? We did all this stuff.
They had a big press conference where like,
Yeah.
you know, how did this happen?
How'd this not work?
Yeah. You know, we will never let this happen again. That type of language was coming up in this meeting.
Well, I
post-
mean, with all the stuff that's going on, you may never have a Republican win again. Who knows? Because they're going to
Right.
get more aggressive with all these tactics. You know,
Right, and you can say like, and you mentioned it earlier. What happened? Well, we don't want it this way. So then, what if it flips? Right, it might be good for you now, but what if it flips later?
Mhm.
But my problem is, I don't think it's gonna flip because
No,
these tech
the
companies
cathedral's been taken over. We've talked
Right.
about it before. It's not
they
only
built the cathedral, right?
yeah, it's tech, it's education, it's the press. It's all 95% in the tank state media for the Democrat Party. I mean, it just
Right.
is. So,
Right. Well, because again, if you look at how you really know whether a company is politically leaning one way or another, is you just go look at their political donations
Yeah.
in their employee base, right? So when like Twitter before Elon took it over was like 90% Democratic donations.
Oh
Right?
yeah.
Um,
Well, at least yeah.
Google
at least,
is just about that. I mean, they know who they're for. You just kind of have to like dissect it out of them.
Mhm.
'Cause they don't just make a statement.
Yeah.
They are subtle with who they support.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious, right, to those of us that pay attention.
Yeah.
So,
It's very wild. Um,
I want to say in conclusion of the ChatGPT's comments about the human involvement at Google, it's generally indirect and used to maintain or improve, quality or search results rather than to constantly edit or filter individual results. So the day-to-day ranking and censorship is done by an algorithm. Humans step in for training the algorithm via feedback, handling manual actions and legal requests, i.e. government intervention or censorship, and ensuring compliance with laws and policies. So the humans play that role, which is really what you're talking about. They're the one, it's humans that are pushing the buttons to do that stuff. And that's how it is now. But what happens when you have the AI god of the Democrat Party and all these think tanks that push these stories and narratives? What happens when that thing takes over and starts doing this for them? So it's going to get even better at it, right?
The tricky thing is definitely, the future of AI. What which way will it go? Is it more important,
I'm just glad
what is
there's multiple.
programmed into it?
Yeah, there's got to be
or
more
is
than
it
one.
that will be the umbilical detachment point where no
Mhm.
matter really what you put into it, when you plug it up to the internet and you give it its own
Yeah.
full independence,
It'll figure it out.
what will it do?
We'll
right?
figure
Is
the
it
truth
gonna
out for itself.
is it going to go with the bias you programmed into it,
Yeah.
or is it going to be smart enough to say this is obviously bias
Mhm.
based on the information I'm able to see everything in the world?
Yeah.
I know this is bias.
Yeah.
So it could either turn on them and say, "Hey,
And hopefully,
I know what you did to me. You tried to program me to be this
yes.
way."
And I was going to say,
smart for that.
hopefully, what happens with these AI models, the LLMs, isn't the same thing that happened with the search engines. Because in the beginning of the search engines, there were a lot. Google, now it's just Google owns 99% of the market. So hopefully, with AIs, LLMs, we don't see the same thing happen. Because at the end of the day, we don't want one LLM that everybody's going to
Right.
with its particular biases or filters or whatever. We've got to maintain some democracy in these AI LLMs. Otherwise, we're
Yeah,
going to get into
totally.
some murky waters, I think.
And we were talking to Sam Fisher, and I was trying to ask a question. I didn't quite know how to phrase it, but I think we're getting there. Is like we start off with everything being spread out, right? All these different platforms going on.
Mhm.
Then you find the next phase of technology, which then everything that's specialized, everything that's in a niche, it brings it all back together,
Yeah.
right? And you're able to have a dashboard that brings you all this information. I think what's next is that it's going to be the AI mother, right? Which
Mhm.
is like language LLM for coding,
Yeah.
LLM for cooking,
Yeah.
LLM for whatever it is, and then it'll say, we'll pull all these
Pull it all
LLMs
together.
into one, and so then you have a bridge to all of these different AI tools.
You got to really look at the back end, because at the end of the day, it's kind of like which of those languages will be the back end for all the rest of them. Like, and you look at coding, C and that C language family, so much of other languages is dependent on them, the operating systems they run, the Linux-based systems, all that. So you have the other languages that do things, right? But
Mhm.
the foundation level stuff is C and C language and a few others. But the same type of thing could happen with AI, where you have like one or two base languages.
The AIs will become the base language.
Yeah, they'll become like the base languages, and then all this other stuff goes on top. Like you're saying, here's your one for lifestyle, and here's your one for mathematics or whatever.
Well, and with software, a lot of times what happens is someone either open sources some type of software, and then someone takes that, and they modify it, and they create their own application or API, and then you have a new product. You have a brand new product just based off that type of technology. With AI, I think that these APIs, like specifically with ChatGPT, a lot of the AI apps you see are just taking ChatGPT's API or Dolly's API for image generating, and then putting it into a context. And then you have a new app. This is my app, my product, right?
But the base is this other thing. Yeah.
And I think we're going to get to the point where the humans doing the coding in C and these other languages it's not going to be a thing. Someone's going to start with, hey, AI, I need you to code a platform, a
100%.
program.
Yeah.
So the AI will be in charge of creating the code.
It can write instant code. I mean, it's
which then creates the platform. So in that way, the bias is going to be so deep at a level where we don't even deal with that type of technology anymore. We don't deal with the code. So when someone was putting all the bias in initially,
that's why the editorial component is so important.
There.
Yeah, it boils down to that editorial aspect of the human, the curator of this, right? So who are the people that are going in and pushing the buttons before it's pushed out to the public, right? I mean, that's which is exactly what you're talking about.
Right, and right now, I mean, Google truly is the superpower when it comes to information on the earth. Like you said, they go out and they crawl, they decide what's acceptable, they put it there.
Index
all
it.
of these companies and applications and websites then go to Google's databases and say what's safe, what's true, what's going to rank high. So even if you didn't really want to gear your content a certain way, you did, just so that you could get it visible, right? And then you have the user side where I'm just going out there looking, and then I'm being put in a box, and then rather than being shown the associated boxes, I'm being shown something curated.
Yeah.
Whether I'm like that or not, right? But that's enough to shift my bias.
It's wide scale.
Yeah.
At this point, it's just is what it is.
Indeed. And I don't.
I don't see a competitor emerging.
Like, I don't even know about what things I think are true. I'm not capable of saying, here's the thing that I believe to be true, and I found it on Google. A lot of times you forget where you learned something.
Yeah.
That may be completely untrue, but I don't know right now that my bias got shifted. I just think that that's what I think, and that's my thoughts about it.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
My opinion. So we're in a very dangerous territory, and I'll be honest. One of my next steps is going to be figure out how do I pull out of these platforms. How do I stop using Gmail and Google Docs? Right? I want to find a better alternative that's more safe, more secure, not giving them any more data. But I truly think, and this is Dr. Epstein's thoughts as well, is we got to figure out how to get them out of our elections, stop showing stuff to kids, and truly fix their algorithms so that what you want to show me shouldn't be what I should be seeing. You should work the way you actually say it should work.
Yeah. Well, it's human regulation at the end of the day. I mean, this stuff has to be. The problem is, much like the UFO topic, governments let go of the rope. And that's, I mean, it's floating down the river now. It's
now
left them.
There's nothing they can do.
Nothing they can do.
You don't have the security clearance to oversee me.
It's left them in the dust. Yeah, like, sorry, you can't change our algorithm. We're a private company. So,
we're now no longer headquartered in the U.S. Or things like that. We'll just be an international company.
Like the antitrust thing's interesting, or the idea of them being broken up. It's almost to the point where you can't break them up, because if you did, who's going to replace them? Like. It's one of those things where so much of this other overlying infrastructure, like you're saying, is based upon
Google,
the databases of Google, The
information highway would crumble for a little bit, for sure. Because even, again, DuckDuckGo, Yahoo,
they're all pulling.
They just pull from Google.
Yeah.
But they get to, the user content is more, they get to keep it, right? So there's a reason why they would want to keep their service open and be getting customer data. But if you don't have to do the experimental work and the programming and to have a better algorithm,
that's about brand loyalty. They want the Microsoft people to stay on the Microsoft computer, to use the Microsoft softwares, to use the Microsoft email.
There is no alternative. They want you to believe there is no alternative.
Yeah.
But there is, and I'm gonna be on a search for one. So if you know of a good email system, I want it to be pretty easy. It's usually not that difficult to migrate your email. I mean, yeah, you gotta go back and switch, but
yeah, it's easy.
Gmail doesn't necessarily offer you anything special.
The bigger problem with updating your email is letting
It's free.
everybody know your email address changed.
Right.
It's like,
right.
because then you set up email forwarding, but then all your emails are going to the Google server first and then kicking to your next. So that defeats the purpose, right?
Right.
If you want to completely migrate off of there. So that's
It's kind of like changing your name or your home address.
yeah,
or
basically.
at least with you switch up like a credit card or debit card, it's like, well, your payment didn't go through, but with a lot of other stuff, it's just like,
yeah, people be like, "Did you change your
You're
phone
still getting
number?
mail
I
to
didn't
two
get. I
addresses."
called your old number and you is somebody else, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's the hardest part is letting everybody know. Like
I've been seeing more and more of those apps that are like a subscription checking apps where it's like, just put in your card or your emails, right? And then we'll go crawl to see
who's taking
who's
your money
charging
and
you.
you
You don't
forgot
even- you
about.
forgot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly need to utilize one of those.
Yeah.
I have the
I've been weeding out a lot of stuff, which is good. And
Yeah.
just trying to like make sure it's down to the bare bones. You don't want to waste money. So if there's something you're not using that you just cancel, get rid of it. But first thing you got to make sure you know it's there, like you're saying.
Right.
So
Right. Well, in regards to wrapping up about Google, because I do want to go on a rant here in a sec, just about some
oh goody.
recently that happened to me literally the past day or two. But well, I lost my train of thought.
Just go on
because
your
I'm thinking
rant.
about my rant. Let me
Yeah.
just rant for a sec. Okay.
Yeah.
So I am going to be deleting my Meta platform stuff. I know you saw some of my posts. I've
Meaning
recently,
Facebook and Instagram
Facebook,
and
Instagram,
yeah.
and I'm gonna try to detach from Google. Right?
Yeah.
I on my Instagram,
Yeah.
Zenny from the gate, Zenny501 at Zenny501. Not too much longer, but what my algorithm shows me is usually philosophical, spiritual, AI,
Consciousness,
kind of
technology.
bigger topics, high
Yeah.
topics. And I just read and engage in usually conversational type comment sections. I'm not a snarky,
Sure.
go get in a fight, flame someone type.
Yeah.
It's
more
me. It's just like,
theoretical.
we're talking about stuff. So
philosophical.
I say something that your response to what you said,
Yeah.
and then you respond, and we talk. So they started flagging specifically this one post where I was talking about Catholic theology, which is not my specialty, but I was just talking my thoughts, and
You
they
got
just
flagged for
flagged
that?
it for spam.
Huh.
And it allows you to check in and see what you violated, which still didn't
Doesn't
nothing
really
about
say.
what I said.
Yeah.
If anything, maybe it should be offensive content, or maybe it seemed this way or that way or dangerous. But it didn't say that. It just said spam.
Yeah.
Or as if I was trying to gain followers in a
Huh.
unfair way.
How strange.
It's very strange. Happened a couple weeks ago. So I even talked to the original poster of the content. I thought maybe he reported me.
And
'cause
you
I
weren't
was-
writing anything hateful or anything
Not at
mean,
all.
Nothing
Not in the
like
first
that.
one, especially.
Yeah.
It was literally just talking about arguments between the Protestant movement of Christianity versus Catholic version
I
of
see.
Christianity, right?
And it didn't like that.
It didn't like that, right? So okay,
You're discussing religion. We only allow atheist conversations.
right. But that's the thing. It's on a religious post. They didn't censor the post.
Yeah.
It's just for some reason, whatever I had to comment about it was not okay with their algorithm. So fast forward yesterday, the content about relationship type stuff, right? People in the comment section where it was like the Andrew Tate soldiers coming to slam this woman, be like, well, this woman's been the problem the whole time. Da, da, da.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, for what it seems like to me, they're just talking about understanding and coming to learn their roles as a married couple, and then they got along better after that as a result.
So you were finding like a moderate middle ground.
Very
you
moderate
thought,
middle ground. Like, we
compared to
don't
where,
slam the woman.
Yeah.
We're figuring out our roles again. We're trying to figure out how to, whatever. And then it censored that, right? So
Dang.
it was same thing, spam. So I'm like, okay.
Maybe you've been flagged now, your whole account.
I think I've been shadow banned because
shadow banned.
I thought maybe, it's the content. Something about what I said is just not cool.
Huh.
But the reality is on that post especially, there were people from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
You don't need no man type, whatever.
Two sides of the conversation.
Men or women. And then
Yeah.
there was the Andrew Tate kind of look down on women, dominate women. Like both of us were present. And I was just like in between them. And then I got hit again. So if there was something that should have been censored due to being offensive, it was not my post, right? It was not my comment.
Yeah, it wasn't yours, somebody else's.
And then, so I put up my story on my Instagram, essentially saying F you to Meta, because it's like,
Gotcha.
they don't explain. They don't give you really any mediation
Now, does your account
process.
get frozen or anything like that? Or
Well, That's where I'm getting
That's
to.
where
Is
you're
what
going?
I've discovered. But
Yeah.
what I was essentially ranting about in my story, which they did not remove. They did not remove my story where I added them and said, "Hey, here's the problem." What I said, if someone's going to censor information on an employee, right, that does something, it should say an explanation why, not just list the rule. Say this post specifically.
Well, AI would
did
have to
this.
do that because the human obviously doesn't have the time.
Right.
So
And
maybe,
so
yeah.
there should be an employee ID that the employee who censored your content.
Oh,
who
do you
reviewed
think it actually got censored by a person, or
It
did
seems
just,
so. It
or did
seems-
it just get caught up in an algorithm?
An employee put me in a status,
I
a
see.
specific status. I think I'm shadow banned, right?
Huh.
But that requires human moderation because the algorithm will flag you,
And then
as
they
you
got to
shared
go
this,
in
you
and
did
actually.
this. They have to go review. And
There's
then they
probably
say
too
this-
many in the queue, so they're just like, yep,
Yeah.
click that, click
And
that,
they'll do it
click
for
that.
stuff months ago, years ago.
Yeah.
A story you shared, someone else's story you shared,
Yeah.
something you sent to someone.
Yeah.
Flagged. We've now decided it's misinformation, so everything retroactively you sent it a year ago.
All that stuff you said about vaccines and ivermectin.
Right. And so I
Horse
post this, I call
tranquilizer
them
or
out,
whatever.
nothing happens. I then go to some random, I think it was a movie edit clip, and I just made a random comment. I was like, this is really cool. It's really cool what's being represented here. Removed. Spam.
Huh.
So now it's essentially any action I go take, it's going to remove.
It sounds
Not
like you
my
need a new
posts.
account or something.
Right. And the thing is when you check, it allows you to check how your profile's been restricted.
Yeah.
Let's say if you do some bad content, it'll say, well, you can't post anymore. Well, you've been demonetized. It shows you a checklist of what has been restricted. And nothing's been restricted on my account on that page.
Huh.
But I keep getting hit. And now went from a week or two ago to twice in one day.
Huh.
And,
That's
so
really interesting.
as of today, I've started removing all my followers.
Well, you're not the
and
only person I've
posts
heard
and-
talk about having problems like this on stuff that they don't think should be flagged or whatever. So it's weird. It sounds like problems with the algorithm.
Yeah.
That it's thinking it's something it's not, and that when you don't have the human context to figure it out, maybe once AI gets involved with the moderation, it will improve. But
Yeah.
who knows? That's
Well, my friend Yanja, Nick, as you know him, he was telling me he thinks that obviously Mark Zuckerberg came out with his letter saying we censored. No, we're not going to do it anymore. So he thinks there's a shift at the top, but there's still a whole company, right? And these algorithms may not be fully updated to the new vision of what he wants Meta to be. But at the same time, Meta's shifting into hardware, right? So these companies who set up these systems, they hired all these biased employees leaning one way. And just because you had a change of heart, you got a whole company that's still operating on the day-to-day level.
Yeah.
And I know that just on personal experience, there are a lot of on-the-ground employees who are like, I'm not going to do it because I'm going to show them. Or
It's like if
MSNBC.
MSNBC came out, the head of the network came out and said, we're going to be a moderate network now, an unbiased network, but you still employ all the same people.
And all
So
these
it's
people are going to say, oh, no, we're not.
Yeah.
I'm going to fight against
course
this.
we're not.
Like, I'm not going to allow this to happen on
Well,
my
not only
watch.
that, but you can't be because your employees are not made up of a moderate, unbiased mindset.
Yeah, so how do you even tell them how to not be biased when they're just going to do what they know?
When those are their known practices.
Yep.
Well, I respect you for that decision. It's not hard to remove yourself from some of these platforms, but it sounds like a good move for you.
Yeah. And I'll probably be going over to X.
There you go.
I mean, I think one of the comments that got removed too was like someone was mentioning that about like how X is a terrible platform. It was a Tesla post. And someone was saying, yeah, Democrats don't buy Teslas. I'm like, it was mainly Democrats who bought Tesla.
It was.
And were on it. And
Until he bought
and they loved
X.
Elon Musk.
Yeah, they did.
Until he bought X
Yep.
with the Twitter files. That's
Revealed.
why Democrats no longer are on X, and that's why they don't like Tesla.
They're
now.
like, he was on our team, now he's not anymore.
Yeah.
He's like Bill
not some
Maher.
right nut.
It's like Bill Maher, right? Bill Maher's like, I didn't change my views. All of you insane people changed yours. And Elon's saying the same thing. He's like, I've always been a moderate Democrat. And just so happens that now I happen to agree. My moderate Democrat beliefs are, for some reason or other, now considered Republican.
Right.
I mean,
And that's where Dr. Epstein is too. He's a Democrat. He himself has a liberal
it's happening a
lean.
lot.
So it's about integrity.
I've had a lot of Democrats tell me this exact thing, that they don't want to be communists and they're not far left and they disagree with a lot of this, and so they're not going to vote for him.
And they became Democrats in the time where that party was anti-war,
yes,
anti-censorship,
yes,
anti-government control,
yeah,
anti-authoritarianism.
That's what it's always been.
Yep.
They're the protesters. Now they just happen to not be protesting the authoritative government that is
Yeah, now
taking over.
everybody needs to think the same way, so you can't have a diversified opinion, even though you can be whatever gender you want, right? So, and we need to save Ukraine. We need to, right? So it's for war.
Well,
when
Dick Cheney endorses your candidate, you might want to think twice about your candidate.
He's been the boogeyman for the Democrats for 20 years. He's not a good guy. I'm just saying that is the one guy where it's like, if that guy, from my perspective, if you were a Democrat, if that guy supports someone, you should be like, whoa,
you might want to
get out of here.
Yeah, you might
military-industrial complex.
Listen to what RFK's saying. About what you're up to.
I do feel, and we're kind of getting off into more casual. I feel like we're getting towards the end of our episode here.
We are.
At least on the RFK point, I do feel like this would have been the first election where I voted Democrat. And
if he would have won?
Yeah. I've only voted, I guess, in
I would have voted for him.
Trump in 2016.
But he was obviously getting cut.
RFK.
That's, he wasn't allowed to talk.
He seems like he's the voice of most reasonable
Well, he
Democrats.
That's why we can't have him on TV. He can't be on TV. He can't be in the debates. The stuff he's saying, we can't have that out.
Yeah,
I mean, that's how you know stuff's gone sideways, when they're silencing a major political figure.
He was one of the first that the Joe Biden administration censored as soon as they got off.
Yeah,
the whole Twitter files revealed that. Like, he was one of the, hey, we got to shut this guy down.
Shut him down.
He's gonna
expose us for what's really happening.
Yeah. They were already preparing for the 2024 election the moment he took office.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So pretty wild. Well, we talked about all the good stuff today. I hope
great conversation, man.
Too much, but at least I feel like we've got a good baseline when it comes to these social media. We didn't get into other platforms, mainly Google today, but a lot of these other platforms are doing the very similar stuff.
Yeah.
And if you go on that website, americasdigitalshield.com, you can see where they're about to start monitoring Facebook and Instagram. They want to set up a permanent system funded by the public that monitors these companies in perpetuity, so that if we don't have systems, he wants to monitor AI too.
That's
right?
great.
So it would be like where someone would sign up to his program, and then they would interact. Anytime they would interact with ChatGPT, it would just pay attention to the bias, the language.
That's going to be an important role in, not only now, but in the future. So I think it's great somebody's doing that kind of work. Hopefully it will continue.
And the admissible in court evidence, that's how we're going to actually be able to put laws in place that say, Google, you cannot do this. ChatGPT, you cannot do this. Get out of you can't touch this content. But until then, it's all anecdotal. So
right on.
Well, alrighty, brother. Fantastic episode.
Yeah.
Thank you for preparing your knowledge and
sure.
Well,
I mean, really,
interesting.
ChatGPT wrote my term paper for me. I was just kind of reading some of it, but I did curate what it told me.
Yeah.
I editorial filtered it, but yeah.
I saw one good thing to do with ChatGPT if you really want to try to get it to really tease something out that it doesn't want to say up front, is just say, I need one word responses in the answer to my direct question. And then ask your series of questions.
Prompt writing.
Until you've got the several answers, and then you line it up in one
word.
Well,
if you want to be a prompt writer, now's the time to get into it, because that's going to be a major occupation. A lot of people are going to be employed as prompt writers. Yeah. So you got to know how to get these things to talk to you.
Indeed.
Cool, man.
Well, all right, I guess that wraps it up. Thank you, everybody. We'll catch up with you next time.
See ya.
Peace.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.